with experts on Dev TV. I have an amazing expert that has over 15 years of experience. He's worked in the private sector and he's worked in development. The amazing thing about this gentleman is that he was one of the first people to appear on Dev TV and actually guided us on exactly what sort of content we should have on Dev TV to make sure we are impactful. I will let him introduce himself to you. Welcome, expert. Can you please introduce yourself to us?
Hello, everyone. My name is Yinka Abimbola. I'm a multidisciplinary professional. I've got an academic background in medicine and surgery, but I've also been fortunate enough to have over 15 years private sector development experience, both as a private sector operator, both as an entrepreneur, and working on the international development side, on the donor-funded side. So I've implemented a number of donor international development programs, donor-funded programs, both on the side of FCDO, the German Development Corporation, and I'm looking forward to sharing my experience with you. Yeah.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Now, I suppose the first thing to ask, I know the story, but maybe you share the story with our audience, is that why from medicine, from being a medical doctor, how on earth did you end up in development?
Okay. Well, it's a series of fortunate events. Let's put it that way. Yes, I did train as a medical doctor. I practiced as a clinician for a number of years before I went ahead to get an MBA from the Lagos Business School. It was immediately post the MBA that I began my foray in international development space, or rather private sector development space, working primary. I started off my commercial career with Olam International. I was fortunate to be one of the pioneer set of West African managers that was employed by Olam, basically to understudy the entire corporate structure and understudy the entire business operations, agro commodities trading, fast moving consumer goods businesses, sourcing or agro commodity sourcing, and the rest of that. So I was quite fortunate to have joined Olam at a quite senior and pivotal stage. Because we had a lot of responsibility at that time that cut across multiple commercial functions, financial intermediation, logistics, warehousing, supply chain management, agro commodity sourcing, and the rest of that. So it gave us a breadth of experience that basically positioned me to be able to transition into international development space.
So, I mean, given now, I'll just cut straight to development. So, given all of that incredible experience that you had at Olam, and you now switching to development project, what was it? What was it that was different about doing? Oh no, maybe what I should ask is, what is the different role that you played in development, and how did the experience at Olam help in delivering that role that you played in development?
Okay, excellent question. When I was at Olam, I worked at a senior managerial level. I was a regional manager of different fast-moving consumer goods brands, and it basically gave me a commercial role that oversaw multiple business functions. When I pivoted into international development space, it was essentially the same sort of role. In other words, I was sort of like a pivot. My role was something that wasn't already created. I had to become amenable to different business functions. I was coming from a commercial perspective, not necessarily the typical direct delivery donor, just go and give here, go and give there sort of program, but essentially a commercial function that was data driven, information driven, that required a lot of research, a lot of analysis, a lot of analytics to inform decision making. And this was my first foray into market system development. Market system development is not your conventional international development approach. It's basically a core commercial function that's situated in international development practice. And it basically emulates real world commercial practices. As it says, making market works for the poor. So the idea of what I was positioned to do was to basically engage with commercial entities make them see things from a business point of view, and make informed business decisions that had a social impact.
So I mean, that's very interesting. Now, if you compared the two, right? So you were, I mean, the skills that you gathered in the private sector, especially working with that large company and doing this multidisciplinary approach to your work in that in that company, and now switching to development, would you say that to reach the senior height that you've reached in development, would you say that's a sort of prerequisite to have sort of like almost like a 360 view of commercial enterprises, and especially in whatever sector you're intervening in? Would you say that's a requirement for a development professional in this day and age?
Uh, Yes, I'm inclined to agree with that position that it's a requirement for development professionals in this day and age, simply because development or economic development has transitioned to a much more commercial focus, simply because of the ethos of sustainability. For something to be sustainable, there has to be some sort of commercial interest, there has to be an exchange of value. And which is why it is very important for development practitioners to understand that they are creating an exchange of value, regardless of what target beneficiaries they're looking at, regardless of what value chains they're working in, regardless of what objectives the program may have. But the core focus is that you are creating a system for exchanging value. So you must have some sort of commercial orientation that is driven by analytics, driven by research, driven by data and sound business decisions. There's been this sort of perception that development funds are free funds. It's free of repercussions. But just like every commercial interest, there's no fund that is free of repercussion. Funds are intended to trigger value creation or value exchange. So it has to be seen even by practitioners from that point of view that their role is to trigger value exchange, value creation, value mediation between different parties, whether it's the poor, whether it's entrepreneurs, whether it's small businesses, whether it's micro businesses. The whole idea of a business entity existing and the ethos of private sector development is to create, exchange, and transfer value.
No, I thank you very much, and that's just eloquently put. And I really want to try and drill down on the private sector engagement element, right? So you talked about all of the skills that now new development professionals should have, and especially when we want to scale interventions and we want to make it sustainable. The question I have though is, it sounds like there's now this sort of like private sector engagement fad, which is basically to say that, okay, the minute you go to a private sector actor and that private sector actor is engaged in your project, you've already done private sector engagement. What has been your experience in terms of what you have done personally to engage private sector actors and what you have seen others do? And what would you say are the things that we do badly in economic development to attract private sector actors? And what are the things that you have done that you think we can learn from that has been a lot more effective in the way we bring private sector into interventions, into economic development? And hopefully they stay for a while in the space that we've attracted them to. So what had been your experience in that area?
Okay. Regardless of how we want to look at it, operators in the international development space are essentially facilitators. We're not market actors. The private sector partners are the market actors that we're trying to introduce either new concept or get them to look at business in a different type of light or in a different way. Now, we first of all must understand that these private sector partners exist for profit. We have a not-for-profit hat on, but they exist for profit. So in terms of engagement, your engagement must be on the basis of demonstrating that there is sustainable profit. The scale of profit is arguable, but you must, from the international development perspective or from private sector development perspective or even an economic development perspective, be able to demonstrate that there is some profit, I put profit in quotes, it may not, it not necessarily become monetary profits. It could be as vague as uh, perception profit. Let me put it that way. In other words, the company seem to be doing things in a different light that will trigger and affect their bottom line. So your role as a private sector expert or a private sector development expert is to be able to convey the information in a way, in a form, in a manner that the private sector actor is able to see and understand the incentive of why he should adopt either your approach or adopt you as a partner. Oh my God, apologies. We have run out of electricity,
No,
but
it's all
hey,
right. Please
it's
carry
Africa.
on. So we'll hear
So,
your audio. Please carry on.
uh, yes. So, in terms of engaging private sector, now the whole ethos is demonstrating that there is an incentive for engagement and understanding that their purpose for existence is profit. So they're a profit-driven entity. You can't go there and they see you as a do-gooder. But yes, they enjoy the fact that you do good, but is there a profit? Is there sustainable profit behind the good that you wish for them to engage in doing? So that is a fundamental part of engaging private sector actors, being able to speak their language, talk their talk. Talk their talk is bottom line. Private sector operators are not famous for being patient. You have to be able to use numbers to drive home your story, use incentives to drive home your story in terms of attributing numbers to those incentives. I'll give you an example. In the course of my work, we had a scenario where we wanted to encourage we wanted to encourage small scale poultry farmers to adopt better poultry health practices, basically usage of vaccines, use of appropriate feed techniques, and the rest of that to improve outcome or yield from their poultry farms. The poultry company, and if you just think about it logically, who has the greatest incentive to see poultry farmers utilize products that will make their farms yield more will be the poultry or the veterinary pharmaceutical companies that make the drugs or make the vaccines or make the products that these poultry farmers need.
Yes.
By virtue of their business model, these veterinary pharmaceutical companies basically do some sort of marketing. Maybe they stop their marketing probably at the wholesale simply because of the cost implications of marketing. They stop it at wholesale markets. They talk to major distributors, major operators, and the rest of that. We have an interest to ensure smallholders have more yield. Smallholders would like to use those products. Some of them are aware, some of them are not. Some of them know how, some of them don't. So we then go to the veterinary pharmaceutical company to say, oh, hi guys, we're development partners. We would like you to trigger or create an intervention that would ensure your product reaches the last mile, the smallholder poultry farmer who wants to use your products. Right now, we understand your current business model maximizes your profit because you stop at the wholesaler, you sell bulk, and you leave the wholesaler who then decides on how to retail or micro offset the products. But we see a gap in that it doesn't get to the smallholder as fast as it should, in the quantity that it should, is not being used in the right way it should. So you present, quote unquote, a marketing plan. They already have a marketing budget. What you're coming in to do is to help them understand how best to drive their marketing plan such that they understand that not only is the wholesaler their customer, even the small scale retail poultry farmer is their customer. So you design an intervention along those lines that expands their product portfolio. That way, the MD of that veterinary pharmaceutical company immediately sees the bottom line. He sees, oh, maybe I might increase my sales by 20, 30, 40% simply by engaging with this development partner to reach a larger pool of customers. I may be changing my business model because my business model right now stops at the wholesale market, but what they're introducing to me extends beyond the wholesale market into the retail market. He is not immediately willing to enter the retail market. Now, this is where private sector engagement becomes very important. You've demonstrated with numbers, you've demonstrated with research, you've demonstrated with analytics that, oh, we've sampled a small community, X number of people say they don't have this knowledge. They think if they have this knowledge, they would do better in terms of practice and outcomes. So you design a micro intervention with this partner and say, okay, let's pick a select location to prove the concept that we're discussing. The idea that You can sell more products, you can make more margins if you target not only the wholesale market, but extend your support and control and sort of understand the market beyond wholesale into the retail. So they basically then start building trust in your model, building trust in your research, in your analytics, in your numbers. And it's proof positive. And for every for profit business, hey, if I make more money doing what I do and more people are happier about what I offer, it's a win-win for everybody. My job is done as a development practitioner because I basically ensured that the last mile operator who I want his small scale poultry farm to survive because he's using the right kind of goods in the right quantity with the right kind of knowledge, with the right kind of practices, all of that is happening sustainably. I don't have to exist in that ecosystem anymore. I can then move on to, oh, okay, I've done it with poultry. Let me see what can happen with fishery sector. It's the same thing, rinse and repeat. Same model, different approaches, different numbers, different research required, but the ethos of practice still remains the same.
Man, thank you very much for that detailed example. I love that. So, but there are things that you raised in that example that concerns me in terms of my interactions with some development professionals, and that's numbers. You mentioned numbers, and you mentioned packaging those numbers in ways that speaks to the private sector interest, which is bottom line profit, right? And the ability to present and to come and advise on business model changes. And on top of all of that, to chaperone the private sector actor to really begin to see that, look, this will really help their bottom line. Now, these are not typical development professional skills. Now, what is it that we need to do as development professionals, as economic development professionals, to really begin to focus on these key things that you mentioned, the numbers, the presenting the numbers, the engaging. And the engagement is not just to go and talk that, oh, you can make profit over there, but actually to prove that you can make the profit and then demonstrate that you can make the profit and then begin to withdraw from it. As you know, some of the things that we do in development is that we just bribe these private sector actors by saying, okay, you know what, we'll pay for X, we'll pay for Y, so please come and join us in this intervention. So what are the skills that you would say that we in economic development need to begin to really focus on so we can do this better and do it the way you've explained?
Right. Knowledge is what separates goals. The more you know about a goal, the more you are likely to reach that goal. One of the key things about the development sector in Africa, as it is in terms of practitioners of the African origin, yes, I would use that loosely. Practitioners of African origin is that we've basically been spoon fed for a while. We've depended on development funds and deployed its usage without a specific commercial focus. The maybe because I come from a commercial background where your numbers have to make sense. Before it's almost like you're making an investment pitch every single time, and I don't think it's far off from the international development space because funders put out request for proposals. Your proposal is basically your investment pitch that I can use X amount, X thousand, X million of pounds or dollars to trigger this activity. Now, there is often a disconnect between the proposal and the content of the proposal and actual implementation. And this is where I think for any development expert or any practitioner of African origin on the African continent who really wants to see Africa grow, we've got to demand skills of ourselves. We've got to be able to commercialize our thoughts. We can't practice development the way it's been, or we'll get the same results. Africa has been on aid for God knows since
Since
before I was born.
independence, yes.
Yeah, we've seen excellent business models that have been born from development support. Arguably, there are lots of companies that are doing excellently well now because they were triggered by development support. And this is where, or the crux of the matter, that practitioners have to understand that we're basically triggering sustainable commercial practices. So we have to operate both like the private sector for profit entities that we want to support or that we want to engage. We've got to task ourselves in that regard. And tasking ourselves requires a certain set of skill sets. Commercial skill sets in terms of business analysis, in terms of business presentation, in terms of marketing skills, in terms of understanding supply chain logistics and the rest of that, and being able to match that with a cost versus profit model that basically highlights where the costs are heaviest and where profits lie and the sustainability of those profits. These are things that I think we need to refine and crystallize in the development space within the African continent, because you see it replicated all the time. There are huge sums being deployed for development programs, some with a private sector development focus, yes. A lot of them are deployed in programs with, I would say, direct delivery. For instance, I wouldn't task a healthcare program with the same view, simply because the funds are designated for specific interventions that have to do with lives and the rest of them. But when we talk about economic development, private sector development, you're trying to trigger sustainable economic practices or sustainable commercial practices. So it's got to be viewed with a different lens. And if you were to ask me, I would say all of aid should be triggered towards private sector development, because the whole idea is to build entities that can stay the course beyond the immediate funding. The funds being deployed are to de-risk things that would normally, or support these entrepreneurs or support these business or commercial operators who have identified a business model that seems to be creating value along the chain that affects the target beneficiaries in terms of livelihoods, in terms of improving livelihoods for smallholders and the rest of that. So this, for me, is the gap and the skill sets and the the orientation that needs to change in terms of economic development and private sector development practices in Africa.
Man, thank you very much. I mean, that's just amazing. I love the examples. I love the way you eloquently describe exactly what the skills are that we need, and especially the example you gave of the poultry. That's amazing. Thank you very much. Just one last parting question, because I know I can't hold you for too long. And that's just to say, if I am a professional, whether in medicine, in engineering, and I'm eyeing economic development, I'm seeing that, look, even maybe in financial services, in banks and so on, and I'm thinking of joining development. What are the things that I can do? I mean, you move from being a medical doctor to become a senior person in economic development. What would you advise me to do to get into economic development? And not only to get into economic development, but to rise to the heights that you have risen to?
Well, yeah, I don't think you can escape the route of getting the right kind of knowledge, information, and training, first of all. But you can't get those on the job. You can self-train, you can self-start. It doesn't rely on going to an Ivy League school or anything of that sort. No. Yes, that counts for something, but you can't demonstrate the capacity of thought. I think that is more crucial: the capacity for thought, capacity for research, capacity for analytics, capacity for data sourcing, data gathering, and informed decisions based on data analysis. You can't demonstrate that independent of whatever sector or whatever business environment you find yourself. For instance, I've had colleagues who, let me give another example, who basically wanted to support the adoption of insecticide treated nets in the African continent. Now, insecticide treated nets are for a health purpose, prevents occurrence of malaria. But for the producer or the entity that manufactures insecticide treated nets, it's a business venture. So I have to be able to gather data demonstrating that, oh, their net manufacturer, I've got a community with 20 million persons. Of the 20 million persons, 6 million of them are under the age of 15. they will all have malaria maybe 2, 3, or 4 times in a year. There is a cost to falling sick from malaria. Instead of using anti-malaria medications, they can prevent and avoid that cost by using insecticide-treated nets. You who make insecticide-treated nets, this is the market size that you have. This is the sheer number of people we can pitch this to. This is the ideal cost, because compared to your insecticide-treated nets, these guys will either sleep in, they would buy the basic insecticide spray or whatever, which is your competition. What I'm trying to demonstrate there is just the thought process. We've not got into the details of gathering the data to prove your case to that insecticide treated net provider or producer. But that's the thought process that pushes you in a position to even engage with these private sector partners. That's the sort of thought process that you need to have, the sort of skill set that you need to have in terms of conducting some bit of market research, market analysis, just basic data gathering to present a commercial case for engagement.
Listen, thank you very much, man. I know we've gone way beyond our regular time. I just like to say thank you very much for coming on. First of all, thank you for inspiring us to do great work on Dev TV, and thank you for really presenting a case and inspiring economic development professionals. So hopefully, people that are watching this, the audience, can pick some insight in some of the things that you've described. And I pray that you will come back on Dev TV to inspire us some more. So thank you very much for sparing the time.
Any points? Thank you for having me. Thank you very much.
Thank you. So there you have it, ladies and gentlemen. This is an amazing episode. We've gone way beyond our regular time, but I think you would agree with me. It's worth it. He had given us amazing examples of what it is that we need to be doing in economic development, what aid should essentially move towards. And more importantly, he's given us ideas of the type of skills that we need to have when we're thinking of joining economic development and when we're thinking of doing private sector engagement. I think more importantly, at least for me, is the idea that, look, you don't have to go to an Ivy League to become a really good economic development professional. You can be trained on the job, but you need to have a really logical thought process that will present your case commercially to the people that you're selling your ideas to. So thank you very much for watching. Please leave comments in the sections below, and please show appreciation to our fantastic guests. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir.